Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
From weapons, crime, and fentanyl exposure, the province pledges making supportive housing safer.
Will help supportive housing providers be able to put strict rules in place.
But some fear it's not the right approach.
We were very surprised to hear the announcement today, and it's very concerning.
Plus, hundreds of millions in losses.
We had the 2021 heat dome. We've had record-breaking wildfire seasons. We've had unprecedented winters where we have cold snaps that wipe out crop.
Why BC farmers faced the largest financial hit in Canada last year. Now, the growing calls for governments to step up. And fast and fun. With more e-scooters and electric bikes on city streets, how they are reshaping bike lanes.
When you get people going 25 or 30 kilometers an hour in a congested area, that's when you get the risk.
I feel like they don't stop, so you're, as pedestrians, we are the ones who have to watch out.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening, I'm Baneet Braich. Thanks for joining us. Well, the province says safety and supportive housing will get a hard look with a new working group. Its focus is to tackle crime, drug trafficking, and to consider removing supportive housing from the Residential Tenancy Act. As Liam Britton reports, the new changes could make it easier to evict tenants.
For thousands in BC, supportive housing is the last safe roof over their heads before the street. But the province's housing minister argues housing providers can struggle to protect the majority of residents.
They feel there are some gaps in how they can enforce the rules.
He's seeking a fix, a task force to consider if pulling housing protections afforded by the Residential Tenancy Act from supportive housing could help.
How do we ensure that they have some basic rights, but also how can we ensure that those that are working there and those that are operating these places can make sure that the rules are being followed?
A housing provider in Victoria says they need extra help with a few problem tenants. Some threaten or carry out violence against their fellow residents or staff.
The situation as it currently is makes that sometimes remarkably difficult to remove folk, and that the safety threat continues while the process plays itself out.
But this housing advocate argues that stripping protections provided by the Act leaves largely marginalized people with little recourse with their landlords.
If tenants aren't covered by the Act, it's really up in the air where they can go to ask for their rights to be protected.
Some buildings, like these on Vancouver's Granville Street, according to police, saw hundreds of emergency calls in 2024. A group speaking for businesses on the Strip says a task force isn't going to cut it. They want a provincial inquiry into supportive housing.
Something needs to be done that's significant, drastic, and I would suggest bold. We have to get serious about this. And we have to do it today, not study it for months. We all know there's a significant problem.
Now, as for those who might find themselves evicted without these protections, Calon argues many of them struggle to follow rules because of severe addiction and mental health issues. And he argues some of them might be better off in complex care. He's hoping his task force has recommendations by the fall. Liam Britton, CBC News, Vancouver.
It's been a tough few years for farmers, and the past year might have been especially bad. New data from Statistics Canada shows that BC's farmers lost nearly $500 million last year. It's the worst net loss in the country. As Brady Strachan reports, the BC Agriculture Council is warning that without more support, the future of local food production is at risk.
After years of devastating crop losses, Jennifer Diol is hoping this is the year her family farm can finally see a profit.
This is the first year since we've had the property, since 2021, that we're seeing a full crop.
Diol and her husband started farming 7 years ago, growing table grapes, tree fruits, and vegetables like cauliflower and broccoli.
This is actually purple. So one thing we like to do is grow a diversity of food that you typically might not find in your grocery shelf.
They sell their produce at farmers markets and a fruit stand on their farm. The past 4 years, though, have been extremely challenging as extreme climate events have devastated their crops.
We had the 2021 heat dome. We've had record-breaking wildfire seasons. We've had unprecedented winters where we have cold snaps that wipe out crop.
With little income last year, Diol had to sell off 10 acres of farmland just to stay afloat.
It was our dream that kind of came crashing to a halt last year, and we just had to make a tough choice of getting out of the apple farm and focus on growing diversity and just paying off our debt.
Diol's financial hardships are not the exception for BC farmers. Data from Statistics Canada shows that BC farms as a whole haven't turned a profit since 2017. The farm sector has seen a larger net loss every year since 2020, reaching nearly $457 million in losses last year. The BC Agriculture Council says farmers are struggling across the province. Added to the recent years of crop loss are higher costs for labor and inputs, like fertilizers that are imported from the U.S.
So when you think about that, like how would you go not having an income for 4 years? You know, it's ridiculous and crazy, but that's what we're up against.
Although the province has provided some support, like recent climate mitigation and disaster relief programs, she says the application process is often bogged down in bureaucracy.
These programs can be often difficult to navigate and can take years for the farmer to see the return.
The council is asking governments to increase compensation programs for those affected by climate disasters so that farmers like Diol in Kelowna can continue to stay in business.
If we lose local farmers and local fruit, then we're dependent on exporting that product in, and food is just going to skyrocket.
Now, Diol is hoping a full crop this year will finally bring a profit and a reason to keep farming. Brady Strachan, CBC News, Kelowna.
A new government report has found that white workers in BC make more than racialized workers in some sectors. And as Jonna Balin reports, advocates say that more data needs to be collected to find out who is affected and why.
It is not at all surprising because we know that these differences are there.
Zareen Naqvi is talking about the differences between what racialized workers make compared to white workers in BC. She's part of the Anti-Racism Data Committee, which put out a report that found white workers make more in sectors like retail, manufacturing, and transport labor, based on Statistics Canada data from 2020.
You can think about it as a first cut into looking at this issue and providing some hard evidence of what those differences in salaries may be for racialized and non-racialized workers.
The study found that racialized workers made more than white workers only in healthcare. Authors say more research is needed to see why it's an outlier.
Now, BC currently has what they call pay transparency legislation that requires government agencies and employers with a certain number of staff to put out reports showing how much their workers make. But this is only based on gender. Some advocates say the government needs to do more.
There's nothing else after that in terms of mechanisms to get employers to close those gaps or fines or penalties for those who are violating equality rights with respect to pay. We don't see any mechanisms of enforcement.
BC's Labour Ministry declined to comment for this story, while Citizen Services Minister George Chow says in a statement that the report provides useful information for employers and workers and that it's been distributed across government. Earlier this year, BC also formed the Provincial Committee on Anti-Racism, their task to help dismantle systemic racism in the province.
Data has to be followed by action, and our province needs to act promptly to break those barriers down.
The committee's set to publish a report on their recommendations by June of next year. Jonna Balin, CBC News, Vancouver.
And if you've walked by a bike path, you might have noticed some changes in the last few years, especially the rapid rise of e-bikes and e-scooters. As Pinky Wong reports, the change comes with some worries about safety for both riders and pedestrians.
We're in downtown Vancouver near the seawall, and we are asking people if bikes and scooters are going too fast.
They're too fast, not aware of what's going on around them, not aware of their surroundings as much as the bikes. The bikes, because they're being bikes, people are used to bikes, but the scooters probably not aware of their surroundings.
They're not all, aware, and a lot of them don't wear helmets either, so they should wear helmets as well.
As pedestrians, we are the ones who have to watch out. With a toddler who's walking, you kind of have to watch out.
According to the City of Vancouver, you have to be at least 16-year-old to ride an e-scooter, and the maximum speed is 25 kilometers per hour. It is also illegal to ride on sidewalks and crosswalks.
So you can get people who are walking at 5 kilometers an hour, people cycling at 10 or 15, which really isn't an issue. But when you get people going 25 or 30 kilometers an hour in a congested area, that's when you get the risk. And the other issue is that you don't often hear them coming. So if a person on an electric device is moving quite quickly, it can be silent up until they're right on you.
But some aren't particularly bothered by the change in what people are riding.
A lot of e-scooters, which is a cool way to get around the city, I guess. I've noticed no difference. They stay in their own lanes and speed's good.
And e-bikes are a big attraction for bike rental companies.
99% of people that ride these are riding at 0 or 1 assist. It's just having that safety blanket of knowing that if they get tired, they can adjust, but people really like having that low level assist with the option to go higher if they want to.
The police say they're keeping an eye on the bike lanes and urge all riders to be respectful of each other. Pinky Wong, CBC News, Vancouver.
And Darius Madavi joins us now with your first look at the weather. Darius, what are we expecting?
Well, we've got a few things to talk about. First, the drought situation. This came out at the end of last week, but I haven't had a chance to talk about it yet. So Fort Nelson up at level 5 drought for the first time this season, but not unusual. If you remember last year, we're right back up where we were at the end of last season. The Peace region, the North Peace Basin and the Finlay Basin have seen quite a bit of improvement because of all that rain that we saw there. But other parts of the Peace, East Peace, South Peace basins, those ones have not seen that same improvement. In the southeast, we also see a serious drought situation, which we are continuing to track as well. That is also reflected in the fire danger. Those areas that we got a lot of rain continue to see lower fire danger, but other parts of the Peace are seeing their fire danger start to climb once again. We had a bit of a cool and wet week last week, but as we head into another hot and dry stretch, as we saw this weekend, we're going to see that fire danger start to climb once more. You can see that cloud heading into the more northern parts of the province, and we see that severe thunderstorm watch down here, but clear skies down here on the south coast, Baneet, and that is continuing as we head into Canada Day tomorrow.
All right, Darius, well, we will check back with you shortly here.
Thank you.
Trade talks that were abruptly stopped on Friday are back on. Coming up, why the U.S. says Canada caved and what that means for the future of trade talks. Trade negotiations between Canada and the United States are back on again. President Donald Trump called them off on Friday, blaming Canada's digital services tax. But Prime Minister Mark Carney has now rescinded it. And Karina Roman has more on Carney's latest move.
Canada is reversing a policy 5 years in the making. The digital services tax was to be a 3% levy on the tech giants that would have brought in billions of dollars. The move to rescind the tax comes after U.S. President Donald Trump threatened to stop trade talks with Canada, and it follows a phone call yesterday between Prime Minister Mark Carney and Trump. But Carney is downplaying the move's significance.
It's part of a bigger negotiation. It's something that we expected in the broader sense that would be part of a final deal.
And Carney hints that the DST was likely to be scrapped anyway. In other words, it was not a hill to die on.
It is a question of timing in terms of the date for the final negotiations and when the tax was coming into effect. And, you know, it doesn't make sense to collect tax from people and then remit them back. So it provides some certainty.
That's certainly in contrast to how the White House is framing this.
It's very simple. Prime Minister Carney in Canada caved to President Trump in the United States of America.
Conservative Party leader Pierre Poilievre thinks the mistake was giving up the tax and getting nothing but renewed talks in return. In a statement on X, he said the following. As recently as 2 days ago, the finance minister insisted the digital services tax would proceed. Then the prime minister put his elbows down and canceled the tax at the 11th hour. The tax is gone for good. The digital services tax was brought in to address the fact that tech giants operating in Canada but not based here may not be paying taxes on revenues generated from Canadians. It would have applied to companies that make more than $20 million in revenues. Mostly U.S.-based companies. It was set to go into effect today to collect 3 years of retroactive taxes, about $2 billion, and then billions more in the years ahead. Now it seems dead, although the trade talks have been resurrected, with the July 21st deadline for a deal still intact. For now. Karina Roman, CBC News, Ottawa.
During the federal election campaign, Mark Carney promised to eliminate interprovincial trade barriers and create a Free Trade Canada by Canada Day, and that hasn't happened. But the Liberal government is declaring a partial victory. Ottawa says it has removed all federal exemptions from the Canada Free Trade Agreement introduced in 2017. Now, provincial and territorial governments are reviewing their own interprovincial trade barriers. A progress report is due next week. And Israel's military is acknowledging what it calls harm to civilians in Gaza seeking aid. It says its forces have new instructions based on what's been learned, and that the incidents are under review. Now, in the latest Gaza military operations, Palestinians are describing a day of the heaviest Israeli bombardments in weeks. Gaza officials say at least 58 people were killed. Tom Perry reports.
In recent days, there were evacuation orders for large parts of northern Gaza and Gaza City in advance of what was expected to be a stepped-up military campaign by the IDF against Hamas. That stepped-up campaign now appears to be underway. Witnesses are reporting Israeli strikes across large parts of Gaza. We've seen images now of a school where displaced people had been sheltering. It's been hit. We're hearing as well about an attack at a seaside cafe that was still open, still operating, but came under attack today. People killed there as well. So it really does seem like the Israeli military has stepped up its operations, and we're seeing that now in the increasing number of casualties amongst civilians in Gaza. Now, of course, the Israeli military says that it's targeting Hamas. It's saying it's going after command and control centers, and it insists it never deliberately targets civilians, but the number of civilian deaths does just keep climbing. This does come as there is more talk at least, about the possibility of a ceasefire. A senior advisor to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is expected to be in Washington this week. There has been talk about a stepped up efforts toward a ceasefire in terms of like diplomatic efforts to do that. We're seeing as well Donald Trump going out on social media this week urging the two sides to reach a deal in Gaza, bring the hostages home. And on that issue of the Israeli hostages, the 50 living and dead hostages that Hamas still holds in Gaza, we did see tens of thousands of people gather in Tel Aviv on Saturday night. And again, the clear message there from tens of thousands of Israelis, hostage families, their supporters, was that it's time for a ceasefire. It's time for the fighting to stop. It's time for the hostages to come home. And certainly in Gaza, the hope is that it's time for the killing to stop. Tom Parry, CBC News, Jerusalem.
It's a heat wave that comes with health warnings and increased fire risk. From France, where temperatures have shot past 40 degrees Celsius, to Turkey, where wildfires have thousands on the move. We'll take you to sweltering Europe next.
CBC Musical Nooners opening day is July 2nd. Don't miss the biggest party of the summer with food trucks, prizes, and a free concert featuring Vancouver's own funky progressive rock band, Brass Camel. And join us all summer long, every Wednesday, as the concerts continue, totally free. Head to cbc.ca/musicalnooners for all the details. CBC's Musical Nooners, Wednesdays at 700 Hamilton Street.
Europe is feeling the full impact of dangerously high temperatures. It's also creating conditions for wildfires to thrive. Briar Stewart has more from Turkey, where fires are raging in coastal regions.
In Turkey, parched conditions and strong winds have led to dangerous infernos. More than 50,000 people have been evacuated from 5 different regions, including this man, who was lifted out of his wheelchair by rescue crews. While the extreme heat has caused fires in Turkey, it's creating sweltering conditions to the west throughout much of Europe.
I guess water.
Yeah.
Water and shade, water and shade.
Yeah, so we got up early to enjoy the sights early before the heat got too intense.
In Seville, Spain, this sign showed a temperature of 45 degrees Celsius. But people didn't need a thermometer to tell them how hot it was. It's awful, says this municipal worker. We have these bracelets that ring with all the heat warnings. Next door, nearly all of mainland France is under a heat alert, leading to some schools being closed. Meteorologists say a large area of high pressure has created a heat dome.
It's effectively like putting a lid on a pot. So it's keeping temperatures very high, moving clouds away, which is enabling more sunshine to hit the surface of the Earth, which generates even more heat and drought conditions.
And experts say the extreme temperatures are becoming more frequent.
In general, it's worrying that kind of climate change, that probably the weather is changing. But just for today, we will manage.
And that means umbrellas and plenty of water for the thousands of fans lining up at Wimbledon.
It's a hot day, you're gonna need it.
During what turned out to be the tournament's hottest opening day ever. Briar Stewart, CBC News, London.
And Darius Madavi is back with us for another look at the weather. Darius, just seeing what's going on in Europe there makes me think of what BC's even experienced in past years, and that's really rough to deal with.
It is, yes. We've seen some extreme heat, as we heard. 50,000 people evacuated in Turkey because of those fast-moving wildfires. There's extreme winds coupled with that heat. An unprecedented number of districts in Paris seeing those heat warnings. Many areas that are truly just experiencing temperatures that they haven't before. Spain and Portugal both seeing the hottest temperatures ever recorded in June in those countries. And my legend actually doesn't go up high enough. The whites there is about 45 degrees Celsius that you can see in parts of Spain. So really incredible temperatures and really driven by climate change. We can see this dark red color here. That means temperatures, the highs that we saw, were made 5 times more likely because of climate change yesterday. This is today, and here is tomorrow. So definitely looking at that extreme heat and watching it over the next few days, because really not seeing any relief until Friday at the earliest. Now, here in BC, it's a different story. We've got some sunshine. We've got lots of heat coming today and tomorrow, especially in southern BC. Wednesday, more cloud starts to move in, not just here on the south coast, but across southern BC as well. But that precipitation is really just confined to the more northern parts of the province, and it is going to be quite scattered. But again, those temperatures climbing tomorrow do start to come down towards the end of the week. Baneet, we've got lots of sunshine coming across the province tomorrow, with just a few scattered thunderstorms up in the north. In terms of the 5-day forecast, enjoy the heat for Canada Day tomorrow.
I will, and I hope you do too. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News. You can watch this newscast on our free CBC Gem app, as well as on YouTube and our website, cbc.ca/BC. Hope you have a great night.